guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about the 3 things that you should know before learning medical coding and the 1 thing that you should master once you've learned medical coding. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay guys, a lot of people start their program and they think they can fast forward through all of the medical law and ethics and the medical terminology and the anatomy and all this other good stuff because they want to get to the good stuff, which is the coding. You want to feel like a coder, or at least a coding student, but you want to feel that way because that's the purpose and the reason that you're going to school is to become a medical coder. Or if you're learning on your own, and you want to just dive right down in. And there's a lot of people that mistakenly think that that is okay, that you can just pick up the book and start learning how to look up codes and boom, you're good to go. But this is not true, guys. They have prerequisite courses for medical coding all the time, and they're prerequisites for a reason. There's another channel that I watch. It's called Think Like a Horse. And the creator there, Rick, he says his famous phrase is, the slow way is the fast way. I agree with this because when you think about it, if you don't have all of your medical terminology, and that is the number 1 thing that you need to know before learning medical coding is your medical terminology. If you do not have this down, it is quite possible that you will be lost when you get into the medical coding part. And how do I know this? So different parts of the body you're going to think of are associated with words, right? With different prefixes, different suffixes, you're going to think of that. You're going to think of those particular things, right? You hear gastro, you're immediately going to think of the GI system. Okay, great, But what if the word was gastrocnemius, the gastrocnemius muscle? You may think, okay, that's in the stomach area. Wrong. You would be wrong. That's the calf muscle. And you have to understand that some of these words may look like they belong to a certain system, but they certainly do not. It's like another one is a talar shoulder. Well, you may hear, okay, the shoulder. So it has to be in the shoulder. You just said shoulder. Actually, it's part of the foot. So that's something that you have to understand and know when you're getting into this. The anatomy is a very complex thing. It all starts with learning your medical terminology. You cannot skip this part. You cannot skip the number 2 one that I would say, which would be anatomy and physiology. You cannot skip that either because as I just demonstrated, there are words that you would think would be associated with certain body parts or certain organ systems, and it's actually something completely different. So again, when you are learning this, you don't want to get into learning the coding and be totally lost, because that's the problem with a lot of people that get into these fast-paced medical coding programs. They're learning the medical coding first, and then they learn medical terminology afterward. That is the backward way to go. So you have to learn it. There is no getting around it. And it doesn't matter if you don't like it, if you hate it, because I've heard of that too. You're going to be in this industry that is going to be requiring you to read documents that is going to be filled with medical terms. So get comfortable with it. Start to like it and embrace it. The more you try to run from it, the harder it's going to be for you when you get into the coding side. Okay? So that's the second thing. So medical terminology and your anatomy and physiology. And you may be saying, well, Blue, whoa, slow down. How do I learn these? Because I'm trying to work through these workbooks and they just don't seem to be working for me. Nothing is sticking. As I've said in the past, when we were children, we had the teacher who had the border up around the room with the letters and the numbers. It is the same thing that you have to do when you're learning anatomy and medical terminology and anatomy and physiology and your medical terminology. It is the same thing that you have to do. You have to incorporate little bits at a time throughout your day so that it starts to add up. You have to make it fun for yourself. I have my Patreon channel, and on my Patreon channel for my patrons, I will make crossword puzzles. I'll make word finds occasionally. For medical terminology, what I do with the word finds is I will make a whole word find, but I will leave the word bank off and they have to search for the words. But I'll give them a theme so they can kind of think about, okay, all these words that they can see. So it helps to learn medical terminology that way. There's also videos on YouTube that are dedicated 100% totally to medical terminology and anatomy and physiology. And there's a lot of really fun ones. Now, I used to share my recommends here, but people want to complain, so I only share them now with my Patreons. But if you have a favorite, you can certainly mention your favorite anatomy and physiology channel in the comments. But that's another resource, and it's out there for free. You don't have to spend a ton of money. And that's another hamster wheel that people get trapped in, is that they think they can just buy their way into learning medical coding, when there's so many free resources out there that if you do your research and you take the time to look, you can certainly find them, and you can certainly make yourself a well-rounded, high-caliber medical coder. And all it takes is just listening to advice and looking at the resources that are out there. So that's something that I can recommend. In my books that are in the description box below, I have my list of posters that I recommend. There's also those fold out little smaller cards if you don't have the space on your wall. There's always those. There's always flashcards that you can cart around with you and just be able to practice those. But you cannot really fully immerse yourself in learning medical coding if you don't understand the language. Don't get caught in that hamster wheel, guys. Just spend the time to learn your anatomy, learn your medical terminology, and learn your physiology, and you'll be good. Because the more that you learn that and you understand the body mechanics, the better off you are. Now, how do you learn anatomy? Well, break it down. Break it down by systems, so that way you don't feel so overwhelmed. Start with the bones. Then you go to the organ systems. Then you go on to the muscle groups. And then you break it down even further to the tendons. And you start working it that way. But build it one thing at a time. There's so many complaints that I get is that it is so overwhelming. It can be if you don't break it down one thing at a time. And naturally, people are going to want to run from things that are just like, it's just too much. But you have to keep in mind, and I say this all the time, we have to know what doctors know while never having gone to medical school. Doctors get the benefit of studying and having this drilled into their head for 10 plus years before they become a doctor, right? Before they're out there on their own, rather. But when they're going through all of these things, they're constantly having to learn this stuff. And then they constantly have that stimulus around them, because if you notice at doctor's offices, you will see the anatomy posters up, right? All around the doctor's office. Do you think that those anatomy posters are for you? No, they are not. 9 times out of 10 is so that the provider can see and they can constantly have it with them so that they can remember. Now, I work in an orthopedic and podiatry clinic, okay? 2 separate clinics, and I'm their coder. And I do see my providers with these huge books that they are occasionally pouring over from time to time, because they have to study, they have to look at, whatever it is, the anatomy, so that way when they go into surgery, they're going to be prepared and they know what they're going to do. But again, that's what it all goes back to, is that studying and knowing your anatomy, the thing that we have to know the most, okay? The number 3 thing that you need to know before you get into medical coding is your pathophysiology. So pathophysiology is the study of the disease process, right? So this is how you're going to learn all of your diseases and their symptoms and everything that goes into it. Now, again, I know you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's so much. I do have a workbook and a book in the description box. It is the Amazon affiliate link. You do not have to click on this Amazon affiliate link, but you can see the title. You can go, and wherever you shop for books, you can certainly try to find it on your own. eBay is another really great resource. I was gonna say reference, but resource to find those books. So if you want to check out eBay, by all means, there's a ton of other really great book retailers out there. So just take the time to find a good deal, all right? If you get a little bit of an older book, this one is the 7th edition. The pathophysiology book I have is the 7th edition. Now, okay, the body hasn't changed. They haven't discovered anything new. So if you get a book that's a few years old, trust me, you're going to be okay. You're okay to learn pathophysiology with that. I'm just saying. So those are the top 3 things that you need to know. Medical terminology, anatomy and physiology, and your pathophysiology. Because when you get into the coding side, if you are seeing all of these diagnoses documented, and sometimes the provider is going to list every single thing about that patient, but it may be symptoms related to a disease, right? So if they say, okay, well, this patient comes in and has the flu, but they also have sneezing, they have fever, they have a cough. Well, the person who doesn't know their pathophysiology is kind of likely to pick up the sneezing, the fever, the cough, and the flu. They're going to pick it all up because they don't know. All they're seeing and what they're looking for is those diagnoses. But how do we know that they're related together? If you have studied your pathophysiology, you would understand that. And when you get into the real world, guys, I'm going to tell you all this. Be prepared that people will not hold your hand. There are a lot of people out there in the world that want their hand held. This is not that industry, guys. This is for people who have thick skin, who are going to be tough, who want to, build a better life for themselves by improving themselves and their knowledge base, not just professionally, but personally as well. So you have to be prepared to do your research, to work on your own, because there's not always going to be somebody there to back you up. You've got to be able to figure this stuff out. And the only way to be able to do that is to set that good foundation. Set that medical terminology, the anatomy and physiology, and the pathophysiology. And yes, I'm going to repeat myself because a lot of people will still tell me, well, why is this important? It's important because if you can't understand the language, you're not going to select the correct codes. Okay, I'm just saying. So that's the thing that you have got to be ready for when you are about to study medical coding. Now, I know you want to start breaking into it and be like, okay, well, I'm learning my medical terminology now. I still have anatomy and physiology and patho, but let me go ahead and start learning how to do these codes. Your habits start developing right away when you are learning medical coding. You start getting used to certain things because your brain starts to say, okay, this is new. So it starts imprinting those neural pathways. Okay, this is how we're doing it. When in actuality, you're setting yourself up all wrong. Your brain should already be able to recognize, okay, this anatomy part, this disease part, this is part of this disease process. This is a symptom of this. I'm not going to be able to pick. I can't pick this up because it's related to this. And you have to start it off the right way. You can't just start it off where you're just going to get into the coding and skip all this other stuff. I see people do that all the time, and they are some of the most ill-equipped coders I have ever seen and been around in my entire life. So it's not a game, guys. It's not a game. And there's people that are depending on you as the coder. They will never see you. They will never know your name. They will never meet you. You will never get to shake their hand, probably, because you are back there and you are working and coding on their stuff. It is your responsibility to make sure that you are capturing everything appropriately, that all the diagnoses that are being selected are accurate, because this health record is going to follow this patient everywhere they go. And if you make a mistake, it's really hard to undo that mistake when it comes to the codes that are selected. And then let's not talk about the reimbursement process where that patient's having to pay for either not enough, they're not paying enough because you undercoded it or you overcoded it. If you overcoded it, then they're paying more than they need to. And there's a lot of people that unfortunately go through medical bankruptcy. And I bet you if you look at all of those things that were coded, is some of it right? Some of it may or may not be right. But you have to be as knowledgeable as you possibly can. It's a learning process every day. And I don't say this to scare you. Again, I say it to prepare you, because there's a lot of people that think, oh, this is such an easy thing, and that all you have to do is just push these codes in, and it's just a really easy desk job. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. If you really, truly want to make this a solid, long-lasting career for yourself, you will be prepared. Medical terminology, anatomy and physiology, and pathophysiology. And finally, the one that I've been waiting for. The thing that you need to master as you learn your medical coding is critical thinking. Critical thinking. And believe it or not, there are a lot of people that don't even think about this when it comes to medical coding. When we are looking at the record, when we are looking at the documentation, we consider the whole thing, not just a certain portion of the note. We are looking at everything for detail and for more specificity, because at the end of the day, it is about specificity. All right. So it's not just, I'm only going to look at this part. Now you can look at the record in whatever sections and however you want to start it. To me, I always start at the assessment and plan and I work my way up, because that's going to tell me how detailed am I going to be looking at this, how much of medical decision making is involved and what all is happening. I always start with the assessment and plan. But what's there in the assessment and plan is not always what they came in with, and sometimes that's the final diagnosis. So that's another thing that you have to understand. Sometimes they're going to say, again, they came in, their chief complaint was fever, and then at the end of the day, they got diagnosed with the flu. Are you going to pick up that fever with the flu? No, you're not, because that fever is a part of that flu. But you would know that if you have that critical thinking, because the doctor does not always have to use the language that's included in the book, and they don't have to lower the language so that the coder understands. That's one thing that I've heard doctors say that the coders don't understand, so they have to change the wording so that the coder can understand. That's never an excuse. Coders should never been spoon-fed like that. They need to figure it out, because it's not up to the coder to be like saying, well, I don't understand this, and then so the doctor has to change. No, if the doctor is adequately and appropriately documenting, it is your job as a coder to figure it out, because they don't have to use the words that are in these books as the codes. They can use equivalent words. And again, you have to look up those equivalent words, because sometimes certain doctors will call certain diseases certain words, but there's also equivalent words to those. So none that I can think of off the top of my head right now. But I'm just saying they do have those instances. So you have to be able to distinguish, oh, okay, yeah, that's what that is. And again, it all goes back to your research and your ability to critical think, because sometimes people don't see the codes the way that they're written here. So obviously that doesn't go together. Did you look up to see if it was equivalent? Did you look to see if it's similar? If it is just a synonym, basically, of what's going on there? Did you look that up? Well, no, it doesn't specifically say. There are some codes that do require certain things to be in there, yes. But at the same time, that's not going to be for everything, all right? So you really have to look at the documentation. You have to be able to interpret it, and that goes back to the critical thinking. It's not going to be just a multiple choice. It's not going to be a check the box deal. It is going to be where you're actually looking at it. You're abstracting, which means that you're taking the diagnoses and the procedures, everything you see, to be able to code this encounter appropriately, or this record appropriately. So again, that's where you are going to be. And having the ability to critical think, having the ability to be able to take direction from other people who may be younger than you, who may be older than you, but in a professional way, you have to be able to take that. You can't just get sensitive every time somebody tells you something. I know, because I get the comments. People get sensitive about the things that I say. But again, if anybody else was telling you this, then you'd be prepared. And a lot of times people get upset because they weren't prepared. Then they find my channel. Then they hear me say it and they want to get upset with me. That's not the way that it works, guys. This is not, again, for those who are very sensitive. You have to be okay, like, okay, I can learn this. I can learn this, and I can learn to be a stronger person and be able to take criticism and be able to take direction. But criticism and professional criticism, not being rude, okay? There's people that, oh, okay. No. You have to be able to take that direction, that learning, all right? And when somebody tries to correct you, you got to be able to take that. Everybody in this industry has to know how to take correction. If you somebody's constructive criticism just because you don't like that person and they're actually correct, you're the one who's missing out. Now, because you're missing out, all these other people are going to be affected. All the people that you code for, all those providers that you code for, that facility that you code for, those are all the people that are going to be affected because you can't take criticism, you can't take direction, you can't take correction. Don't do it, guys. Learn to take it. And does it stink? Yes, it does stink. No one wants to be corrected, but we all learn. We all learn, and that is the most important thing. Now, do I like it when I get corrected on audits? Sometimes I'm beating myself up worse than what the auditor said. The auditor said, "Oh, well, you missed this," or actually it was this, and I didn't see it, and I'm like, man, and then I'm beating myself up because I'm like, oh, how did I miss that? And sometimes you do. Sometimes you just do, and you just, correct the thing and move on. That's all you can do. It happens to everybody. If anybody says, oh no, I don't make any mistakes, they're lying. We're all human, and it happens, okay? And sometimes it's our fault, and sometimes it's technology's fault, because who knows sometimes what happens with these electronic medical records. It does get a little hairy, I'm just saying. So, but that's just something that you all ought to know. Critical thinking is key. It's critical. It's just crucial for us in this industry to be able to do. And being able to have that open mind and that openness to accept correction is going to go so far for you guys. And there's just okay, I can learn from this. And then I'll never do it again, which makes me better and which makes me more improved as a coder. And that's the goal. That's the key. That's what everybody should be looking for, is to get better as a coder, not just treat this as it's a job, it's 9 to 5. To me, I enjoy it. I enjoy it so much. I love it. It makes me happy. It makes my heart sing. That's why I come here and talk about it with all of you. But do I have my moments where I'm just like, yes. Because that's just what happens. You're human. But I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it for nothing, So learn your medical terminology. Learn your anatomy and physiology. Learn that pathophysiology. And then get good with critical thinking. Get good with looking at the entire document, not just a certain part. And try to really understand the disease process. The more you understand the disease process or the specificity or the specific clinic that you're coding, the more you understand it, the better off you'll be. It's like me with ortho. I love sequela. Ortho and podiatry both deal with sequela. And I love that. I love seeing that. But again, it takes a lot of critical thinking to be able to recognize those things, because the documentation is not going to say this is a sequela of this condition. It may say it if you educate your provider, if they want to say that, but they certainly do not have to. They have to show a causal relationship with sequela, but they're not going to spell out the word sequela, and the word sequela does not have to be in there in order for it to have a causal relationship so that you can pick that up. It's that critical thinking that you can recognize it. All right, before I get off in a little tangent about sequela, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. But thank you guys so much for joining me. Have fun with the studying, guys, because it's so much fun to learn. I'm just saying, if this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share, and I will see y'all next time. Bye.